Hello and welcome to this episode of Heard It Here. I'm Kaylee Mason, your host and beef advocate. Today we're going to be talking about something that doesn't get a whole lot of spotlight but plays a big role in herd health, BVD. For any listeners that don't know or anybody that wants more insight on it, we're going to be discussing what it is, one of the testing methods, and why it matters. So today with me, I have a fellow beef production classmate, Catherine Rush. She's going to help us break things down from a student perspective. So thanks for joining us, Catherine.
Thanks for having me, Kaylee.
Do you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Catherine. Like Kaylee said, I grew up in Pennsylvania, so a ways away from here at Colby, but I've been enjoying my time here so far. I grew up raising cattle for 4-H, and I got more into showing as I grew up, and I've always had a passion for the beef industry. I'm really excited to be here at Colby and kind of branch out and learn more things and get to know new people and make more connections as I move on with my education.
Why did you choose Colby?
People always ask me why I chose Colby, and I can't always put my finger on it, but I really do like their beef program here, and it was something that I saw the passion in the people who teach things in our program and also other students that I had met and talked to before I arrived here, and that was just something I really loved, and everyone gave good reviews of this program, and here I am, 25 hours away from home in Colby, Kansas.
Awesome. Well, we're really glad to have you here in the program. Let's go ahead and dive right into things. To start off, what exactly is BVD and why does it matter in beef production?
BVD stands for bovine viral diarrhea, and it is a respiratory virus that cattle can contract, but it also causes other symptoms such as diarrhea, as mentioned in the name, as well as reproductive problems. BVD is spread fairly fast through cattle. It causes a major impact to herd health. I'll just talk a little bit about what BVD entails. Clinical signs: fever, appetite loss, reproductive problems. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit, but cows that contract BVD have lots of issues with pregnancy and carrying that full term. And then BVD also suppresses cattle's immune systems. It makes them more susceptible to catch anything else. It's just like if you were tired and exhausted, it makes it easier for you to catch the flu. And BVD also matters in beef production, mostly because it causes the biggest economic loss through farmers, and a lot of that is with the reproductive losses that occur from BVD. It's cattle losing calves, and that is not helpful for profit or anything in an operation.
So it sounds like a pretty serious disease. Thankfully, there are ways to test for it. In our most recent beef tech class, we actually had a combined class with freshmen and sophomores. Both of us were collecting samples to be efficient while calves were in the chute. Freshmen were collecting BVD samples while the sophomores were drawing blood for DNA testing. So we drew blood from the tail instead of the jugular. Just this time you can still draw from the jugular, but we chose the tail, and a few drops are placed on a sample sheet and then those are sent off to a lab. So would you please explain the testing that the freshmen did?
Yeah, so like Kaylee said, we had a combined class, so there was a lot of things going on. But us freshmen, we were collecting tissue samples. Doing that with cattle is just taking a notch out of their ear. Those samples were collected and put into little vials with solution that will help initiate the test once it gets put into the testing device. With that, we would take tissue samples and then spray ears with iodine to make sure they don't get infected after having an open wound on their ear. And then with the vials, we'll wait 20 minutes while the tissue samples are in that solution. And then after those 20 minutes are up, the solution gets put into a little testing device. You pour it into the one end, and the liquid will actually seep up through the testing device. These devices are called snap devices. So after the liquid makes it fully through the test, you snap part of the test down and then wait again for the results to pop up on the little paper inside of there. So with testing, there is a control dot, and then you're hoping that there are no other dots, because after the liquid goes through the test, it will erase the positive and negative controls as well. So if you end up having a test with more color, that would be a positive test, and that would not be good. We'll talk a little bit more about why that's not so great.
So is the entire herd supposed to be tested, or is it just the calves?
So most producers will likely only test calves because if all the calves are negative, then obviously none of their mothers have it either. But if there are calves that end up testing positive, producers will likely go and test the mothers of those calves to see if they have that positive test. And then with that, any infected animals will need to be immediately removed from the herd just because transmission is such a big risk with BVD.
So what is the easiest way for it to spread within a herd? Like, how does it spread so fast?
Perfect question. BVD transmits through secretions, so that'll be feces, urine. Calves can even drink milk from mothers and get BVD and contract it, as well as semen. So if a sire has BVD and then your cows get bred, and they'll also end up contracting BVD. And as I mentioned with the cows getting BVD from a sire, those are what we'll call persistently infected cattle. So cows that are bred and have BVD will actually give that virus to calf that they have, that they're carrying. We call that in utero transmission of BVD. Those calves that are born from cows that are infected will likely either not make it past the first or second trimester, or if they are born, they will be stillborn, die shortly after birth, or come out with major defects. Also, BVD is kind of a sneaky thing, so if calves are born from a mother that has BVD, they might not appear to have any symptoms until you test and figure out they're positive for BVD. So then there's also what we like to call a transient infection of BVD, which is just acute signs and symptoms when calves contract BVD after birth. So they're getting it from their environment or other cattle around them that have it, which is why it's so important to make sure no cattle in your herd have BVD. That way it's not passed to those calves that are more susceptible to it. With those transient infections, though, about 95% of those cattle will kind of pass the virus and become immune, but that's something special about those because the persistently infected cattle will never clear the virus and they will always have it. It's a lifelong thing for those persistently infected cattle.
So you had mentioned it briefly before, but what will happen if a calf or any cattle that are tested, what happens when they do test positive?
So any calves or cattle that test positive for BVD will have to be immediately removed from the herd, and that will prevent any farther spread of BVD. I will say this, if you're getting new cattle shipped in or getting replacement heifers in or a new bull or anything, you want to make sure that those animals stepping foot onto your property, they come up with a negative BVD test, and that just will help you keep BVD out of your herd. And if you keep BVD out of your herd in those ways, it will help you economically. So BVD affects producers because it's the biggest economic loss they can take. So if you have cows that have BVD and that gets transferred to calves, obviously if those calves make it, they're still infected, and if they don't, that's a big loss for farmers and ranchers, especially on cow-calf operations. And then just another thing to touch on in feedlots, if cattle come in with BVD, they will transfer it to basically every other cow that's around them, and that will overall decrease herd health and make all of those cattle less productive and gain less, and eventually will take them longer time to finish.
So we can do testing for it and look for clinical signs, but is there a way to vaccinate for it?
Yes, so there is a BVD vaccination, and that's something that I highly recommend every producer adding into their herd. It will benefit herd health overall, and if those animals that are vaccinated, they will develop the antibodies, so they will be less likely to contract BVD. So vaccination is definitely a precautionary step that producers can take to limit the spread of BVD or even the introduction of BVD into their herd.
So BVD, as we've discussed, can be a really big challenge for producers because of the impact that it will have on herd health, especially if one tests positive. But biosecurity management is another way to help prevent BVD entering or spreading in your herd. New cattle being introduced, like Catherine said, you need to separate them and test them and make sure that they're not positive for BVD if they are not already coming with records of a negative BVD test. So like if you're buying from a barn and you don't know where your cows are coming from, they don't have those records, it's always recommended to test them for that. So here at the college for our bull sale, whenever we get our bulls in November, the producers have to bring them with a negative BVD test because we don't test them for that. They need to already come with that.
And that also is something that will help protect our own herd. At the college, we have our own cattle. Having other animals on the premises coming from all different places is a big risk for us. So we ask that cattle come in for the bull test and sale with a negative BVD test to protect ourselves as well.
Awesome. Well, this information can really help our listeners understand BVD more and be aware of how important testing is and how successful it can make your herd. Thank you, Catherine, for joining us today. That's all for today's gathering of Herd It Here. We hope that we've beefed up your knowledge. We'll see you on the next episode.